Alright, Dexxy, in preparation of today's figure review, I watched a lot of Lucha Libre, and I watched seasons upon seasons of Lucha Underground. So I think I'm ready to prepare us for official training to become luchadors. Alright, Dexxy, to start off our training, we need to work on, probably our athleticism first? Well. Hey there, boys. Apparently y'all started the party without me. Party in the US of A. Oh, jeez. Not this guy. Yeah, that's right. You call me a guy. So when you have this little bro date and don't invite me, it hurts my heart. My achy, breaky heart. Wait a sec. Did you just quote Billy Ray Cyrus in 2025? All y'all hiding from me and lying, all it does is wreck me. Yeah, you wreck me. Okay, that's Miley Cyrus, a wrecking ball. But either way, I'm sorry, man. But Dexxy and I, we're going to try to train to become luchadors today. And we had one requirement. And that requirement was that we had to show up and we had to be wearing a mask. Alright, apparently you got a mask, so I guess you can join us for today, but I still haven't decided if you're going to stay around in LumberJillville or not, so we'll just see how today goes, alright?
That's right there. I'm ready to do some lucha style. Ready to do some lucha style, D.O. You just tell it's D.O.D.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're saying when you have that on, to be honest with you. Either way, boys. Let's get started. Let's get started in our training for today.
Whoa, what in the world are you morons up to?
Oh, hey, Comer Alexa. I mean, what's it look like to you? Obviously, luch things.
Y'all look like you are about to rob a bank.
What? Come on, that's ridiculous. Yeah, She's on to something. We do kind of look like we're gonna rob a bank, to be honest with you. So, hey, first step of lucha training for today, we're gonna design new masks. Then we're gonna do some lucha things. Yeah, it'll be crazy.
I hope they jump off of high things, like really high things.
Hey y'all, welcome to LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here. Now before we get started, I just remind you to please hit subscribe to become an official resident of LJV and get a first look at all future women's wrestling figure reviews like today's much anticipated, a very exciting figure review of Boss Fight Studios' Legends of Lucha Libre Premium Collector, Taya Valkyrie. I have been anticipating and waiting for this figure for so long. I reviewed that Lady Maravilla Premium Collector figure December 2022, I think it was, and I loved that figure so much. And I have really been looking forward to this figure, so to have it in my hands, I am just super excited to get into the review. So without further ado, let's take a closer look at the packaging, and then we'll open it up. So starting right off with the packaging here, this packaging is beautiful. What I love and really appreciate about this packaging, it has its own personality, its own character. You can tell that they really took their time in designing this packaging, and it looks awesome. And yes, it goes perfectly with the previous woman released in the Premium Collector line, Lady Maravilla. These two are awesome together here. We can see Lady has a pink background and Taya has a green background, but these are nice and uniform packaging. As you can see there, they look great, even displayed on a shelf. My only complaint is I want to see so many more women released in this line. I really do want this line to grow and expand, and I want to see plenty of women released in the future. But yeah, getting back to the packaging here of the Taya, the one thing that really stands out is this nice big open window. We don't see that on Mattel figures nowadays, and this just looks great. And not only that, it gives you a lot of space to get this signed, and that's one of my goals in LumberJillville is to get this figure signed. Well, not this one. I'm going to open it up and review it. But I do have another one on the way that I am going to hopefully get signed somehow, some way. I think this figure would look beautiful signed. But as you can see here, because we have that big open window, we also have a nice view of everything that comes with this figure. We have the figure itself. We have the alternative head. Prince Presley, of course. Can't forget about him. We have the extra hands, and then this awesome pink staple gun. On the side, we have the image of the stunning and talented Taya Valkyrie. On the other side, we have her name, and we have a little bit of an opening on the side. We also have a little bit of a visible opening on the top, and what's nice about that is it allows a lot of light to go through, and that's why this figure's showing up so great on camera MOC. It's because they have the little details of the window opening on the side and the top to allow the light coming through. And on the back here, this is great. We have a little fig photography using the figure itself. It looks awesome. We have a little bio at the top here. As you can see, we can see where she's from, her debut, her finishing move, and everything else. And then we have the rest of the premium collector line, which all look cool. But obviously, here in LumberJillville, we focus on the women's wrestling figures, and we are focused on Taya today. I'm super excited. So, I don't remember how I opened the Lady Maravilla. It's been a couple years. But let me just inspect it and see what we can do to open it up the best way possible. Okay. I don't think there's tape on the side here. So, okay, looks like there's tape on the top. We are just going to slice the tape up top here. Good. Nervous. Okay. And then there's no tape on this, so that should open up. And then there's tape on the bottom. And once I slice that, I should be able to just slide out this bubble. And yeah, so that cardboard is a nice little backing. That's really cool. And then we have the figures. So let me get everything out of here. Let's take a closer look at Taya. Boss Fight Studios Legends of Lucha Libre Taya Valkyrie Premium Collector Figure. This attire is from the Lucha Invades NY pay-per-view produced by AAA on September 15th, 2019 from Madison Square Garden. On this night, Taya would defeat Tessa Blanchard to become the new AAA Reina de Reinas champion. My overall first impressions of this figure, I am absolutely blown away, just like I was of that Lady Maravilla, because there are details on this figure that you really can't tell just from looking at images online. I mean, this figure has certain articulation and certain features and parts used that we don't get in any other women's wrestling figure today. So it's really neat, and I'll cover those features, those parts, and that articulation a little later in the review. But yeah, you really can't tell until you have this figure in front of you at a package how unique it is and how cool it is, honestly. So let's start out with the accessories. Let's start out with the pink staple gun here. Now, this staple gun has so much detail that I did not expect. You can even see here it has a little opening where the staples come out. And the hands that she comes packaged with allow her to hold that staple gun perfectly. So you can kind of slide it in, wrap her hand around, and there you go. This will be a lot of fun for figure photography. I think it's really neat. And yeah, that's a cool accessory to have. Now, speaking of hands, she also comes with these two hands that can be swapped out. And then these two fist hands. Now, I probably will display her with these hands, but yeah. And then we have this alternative head here, which we will take a closer look at later in the review, but we do have an alternative head with some blood under the eye. And then, obviously, let me clear the space here. Let me clear the space. Let me clear the space for Prince Presley, y'all. Prince Presley. We got Prince Presley, and what an adorable little doggy figure it is. Now, He doesn't have any articulation, but that's okay because the articulation that came with Chloe the dog, that came with that Tori Wilson Elite, it was kind of morbid because the legs fall off all the time. And it's like, oh, so at least we have one solid piece. And what makes up for the lack of articulation is the detail and the paint scheme, the paint application. It even has a little fading. The face is painted very detailed, very sharp. So I'm really glad we got Prince Presley. I think that is just an awesome little accessory. I hate to call a dog an accessory, but the floor is yours, Prince Presley. Kill it. Kill it. So jumping right into the face scan, face sculpt, and hair sculpt, I will say I don't think it is a perfect likeness. However, having it in hand, I can tell you with full confidence, it looks a lot better in person. I wasn't a huge fan of the images that were shown online as far as her likeness goes, but having it in hand, looking at it from different angles, you can tell that's Taya. So I am happy with the overall likeness in my opinion. But what really makes up for that is all the detail that went into the head sculpt, the hair, the headpiece. So much of women's wrestlers' personalities and characters come out in their style. And a lot of times, especially with like the Mattel women's figures, we don't get a lot of unique style, a lot of unique detail put into the hair, and that's unfortunate. But what's really cool here is we have her signature hair where we have half of it shaved. We even have a dark color to show that it's real short hair on the side. We have her signature hair going over her right side with a lot of detail to the curls and the sculpting. And this flower headpiece is painted very intricately and sculpted with a lot of detail. And that's a detail that I think it's overlooked a lot. And like I said, with women's wrestling, a lot of them wear such flashy, extravagant attire. And they really take their time with their hair and their accessories. And a lot of times that doesn't translate to figure form in other companies. But here, it just makes me smile that we have Taya's signature hair. And we also have this real intricate sculpted hairpiece. And it's just a lot of attention went into this head. And like I said, it's not a perfect likeness, but I think it looks a lot better in hand. It really does resemble Taya. Now, let's check out this alternate head now. It's my first time popping this head off, so let's zoom out a little bit and let's see how hard or easy it is. Woo! Okay. Had a nice little firm little grip to the head there. As you can see, we got that ball joint. So I did have to cut away because it took some elbow grease, we'll say, to really swap the heads out, but I actually really like that. Now, it's important to note that you can heat it up with a hairdryer or boiling water just to prevent damaging to the parts, but I like that once you swap it out, it fits on nice and snug. I say that because a lot of my Mattel Women's Elites, the heads are barely on. I mean, if you barely move it, the head falls right off. So I like that it's a nice, firm, secure attachment here. And yeah, so looking at this alternative head, I will say I'm not a huge fan of it. It does seem a little darker in skin tone. Kind of seems a little bit too dark, maybe. Now, it's cool that we have a little battle damage on the face. We have some blood under the eye going over her nose. And we have a different facial expression, kind of gritting her teeth. But I will say that the likeness here really doesn't look too much like Taya, in my opinion. Kind of looks like somebody else. Now, when I compare it to the head that it came on, as you can see, it does appear to be a different skin color, which is a little bizarre. And I actually really appreciate the likeness on the head that she came with right here. When compared to this one, I think it actually does look like Taya pretty well, especially when you compare it to this other head. It's cool that we have a separate option. You know, we have another head that we can put on if you want to do some fig photography, but I am going to stick with the head that she came with because I think the skin tone matches better and the likeness is so much better on this one. But it is cool that we do have this alternative option with the battle damage here. So moving right on to the body sculpting the attire, I'm kind of scatterbrained filming this segment because there's so much here to talk about. There's so much that you can't tell from just looking at images online. I'll try to do my best at showing y'all up close in detail what makes this figure so amazing, what really makes it take off and stand out. And it really starts with that body sculpt and attire, especially with the articulation, which we will cover later. This figure has so much articulation that you cannot tell from the images online. You really can't tell until you have it in hand. As I mentioned, I will cover that in detail later in the review, but I just had to throw that out there because these premium collector figures, just like that Lady Maravilla, they have really unique, cool articulation that we just don't see in current day women's wrestling figures. Now, backtracking a little bit to the body sculpt and the attire, I will say the skin tone is nice and tan, perfectly tan. I do think this alternate head is a little bit too dark to match the rest of her body, but maybe it's supposed to be like, you know, really angry, really worked up Taya. But the head that she comes packaged with looks great. Skin tone's great. The body sculpt is amazing. It's unique to Taya. It really does resemble Taya's overall physique. They do a great job with the sculpt there. And the attire is just eye-catching. I was worried when I first saw images of this figure because I thought, okay, that's kind of similar to her Fanaticos figure, which we'll compare to in a little bit. But it's actually a lot different. You know, we do have the orangish red. I am colorblind. Just remember that, everybody. It is an orangish red with her design being green with white outlines. But there's so much detail here to the sculpting that you really can't tell until you look up close. Now, before we do that, let's cover her tattoo. Let's cover her tattoo on her left forearm because there's a lot of intricate detail here. It's very clear, very easy to see, and it's kind of an off black color, so it does look like a tattoo, but it looks really, really good. Now, as far as there's so much to talk about in this segment here. I'm trying to collect my thoughts. The sculpting of the attire itself is fantastic. Now, I say that because the straps are sculpted on top of the body there. So even the outline of her top is a sculpted piece, sculpted around. This is sculpted. And even this design, this green kind of sparkly, shiny design, which you really can't tell until you have it in hand. Just the paint application on it is gorgeous. But the white trim, I guess you could say, is elevated and sculpted. It's raised and it looks awesome. Now, moving on down to her wristbands, they are separate pieces, so if you remove her hands, they would slide off, but those also have really good detail in the sculpting. Her midsection, her torso does have some sculpting there. And the bottom of her singlet attire is like a rubber piece. Now, this is something that's hard to tell by looking at images online. And when I reviewed the Lady Maravilla, I was like, what is that? Whoa! Because it is like a flexible rubber piece. And what that does is it allows a lot of movement and it still looks good. I mean, look at this. Look at this side. That's ridiculous. I don't have any other women's wrestling figure in my collection that can do that. But anyway, so it's like this rubber piece, and we will cover articulation here in a little bit, because as you can see down here in the hips, look at this. This is such a unique joint that we really don't see much. All right, staying on track, staying on the attire. Moving on down to the legs, once again, we have unique sculpting on the trim here. We have the nice fishnet pattern painted on very intricately and cleanly in the openings. And moving on down, we have the knee pads built into the sculpt, which works, nice and stable. We have the fur sculpted on, and then we have the white boots underneath. This figure's attire is a 10 out of 10. I mean, not only is the body sculpting really, really good for Taya, but the attire itself has so much detail. And as you can see, even on the back, we have this pattern that's not just painted on, it has sculpted, elevated trim. So yeah, the attire, the sculpting work, everything about the body sculpting the attire is fantastic. Now let's jump right into the articulation. So let's cover articulation because this figure is so unique. Now, I'm not one of those collectors that looks and sees, oh, 32 points, 35, 25. I just see how a figure displays. That's really what's important to me. But it is important to note that this figure is listed as having 32 points of articulation, and I 1000% agree with that. And it's for the reasons I'm about to show you. So starting off with the head articulation, it moves nice and good. And as I mentioned, it's nice and snug. It fits on great. The shoulder moves in all different directions. Let me try to zoom in here. And it is on a real nice firm ratchet type joint, so it locks pretty good. Now, something you can't tell from images online is we have a butterfly joint. Now, this butterfly joint is rare in women's wrestling figures. We did get it in the Ultimate Edition Asuka with Mattel, but very rarely do we get butterfly joints in women's wrestling figures. And here we have it, and you can't tell from the images because the way that it seamlessly blends into the straps of her top is actually a great design choice. So we have tons of articulation there. We have an upper arm swivel. We have double jointed elbows that can bend really, really far, as you can see. Now the wrist, something else that's kind of hidden, is the wrist rotates and it can go down and up, but it can also, we call that radial deviation and ulnar deviation, where it goes up and down. That's really, really cool. We have this upper torso articulation, really good. The articulation at the waist, as I mentioned, because the way it sits in this rubber bottom piece, you can really move it in all crazy positions, and it looks amazing. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And the way that it holds in position is great. Like, look at this. Now, moving on down to the hips, this is another really unique joint. So I don't know what kind of joint you would call this. Let's see if we can get a good look in there. But not only does it go up, does it go back, does it go to the side, but you can rotate it really, really well. I mean, look at that. That's a joint that the Lady Maravilla had, I believe. But you don't see that in current wrestling figures. You really don't. So not only can you move it in the normal directions, but you can also swivel it out. And I think that'll do wonders for figure photography. That's why I ordered another one, because I cannot wait to pose this figure and take some figure photography. So yeah, I don't know what kind of joint you would call that, but it is super advanced, super good articulation. It is tremendous. And what's really cool is because this bottom piece of her attire is like a rubber, we don't get a lot of holdback. Now I say that because a lot of women's wrestling figures, because the sculpt of the backside, the legs can't go back at all. But because this has a nice rubber texture to it, look, you can kick back. You can kick backwards. So that is unreal. The knees are double jointed. They can bend really good. We have an upper boot swivel, and then the boots can planar flex and dorsiflex up. So yeah, this articulation is unreal. It's unbelievable. And what's really cool is it's kind of hidden, right? A lot of times the highly articulated figures really stand out like a sore thumb with all the different joints. But this one, the hips are covered up pretty good. The butterfly joints are covered up pretty good and seamlessly go into the straps of the top. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't get more articulated than this figure. Now let's do a little side-by-side comparison. We will bring a Mattel figure here in a little bit here. So on the left, we have that Legends of Lucha Libre Premium Collector, Lady Maravilla. Love that figure. Now in the middle, we obviously have today's figure, the Premium Collector Taya. And on the right, we have the Legends of Lucha Libre Fanaticos Taya. So kind of the main event line for them. A little lower price, around $20 or so, and less articulation. Now, as you can see, the Taya in the middle is a lot taller than the other two, and let me get to that. Now, the biggest complaint that a lot of people had with the Boss Fight Studios wrestling figures is that they were too undersized, too underscale. Now, that's a critique that never really bothered me. It was never something that I really was affected by, because the quality of the figure really stood out. But scaling has not been a thing with the Mattel wrestling figures, with the Jazzwares wrestling figures. Anyone who thinks that they actually produce their figures with a scale in mind is lying to themselves, because they just don't. So I think when Boss Fight got a lot of critiques saying, oh, these figures are too small, I didn't really like that. I didn't really buy into it because the figures were beautiful how they were. However, they might have been a little too small when displayed next to your Mattel Elites or your Jazzwares AEW figures. But here, it looks like they corrected that. This Taya is seamlessly should look great on the shelf next to Mattel Elites and Jazzwares figures. Now, Taya is billed at 5'8". So obviously the Fanaticos figure on the right is rather short, right, when compared to this Taya. Also, it's really pale. Now, I did do full reviews of both of these figures, so make sure to check those out if you want to see them up close. But yeah, now Lady Maravilla is listed at 5'7", so Taya does kind of tower over her maybe a little too much, but I think that is because this Lady Maravilla was scaled down probably a little too small. Now, my biggest way of seeing how these scale is to compare it to another 5'8" women's wrestler, Miss Zoe Stark, Elite Series 114. Now, both these women are billed as being 5'8", and look at them together. They're pretty much head and head. They're pretty much the same height. So, as I mentioned, the scaling was never an issue for me with the boss fight figures, but a lot of people was. So, any collector out there that was bothered by the slightly underscaled wrestling figures of the past, they can breathe a breath of fresh air knowing that it appears they did scale their figures up and they look great next to Mattel's. So overall, I give Boss Fight Studios Legends of Lucha Libre Premium Collector Taya Valkyrie an overall score of a 9.8 out of 10. This figure is truly amazing, and I hope my review did it justice, because looking at images online don't do this figure justice. There's so much attention to detail and care and love put into this figure. It makes me remember why I love women's wrestling figure collecting so much. Why here in LumberJillville we're trying to raise a respect level of women's wrestling figures in the collecting community, because these women are larger-than-life superheroes. They are stars, and they deserve to have some amazing wrestling figures made. And more often than not, we get women's wrestling figures that are just pumped out by these larger companies that are really missing that attention to detail, that care, that love. And that's what we get here with Boss Fight Studios in their premium collector line. That Lady Maravilla was a perfect example, and this Taya is an even better example. I absolutely love this figure. The only reason it's not a perfect 10 out of 10 is I think the face likeness is a little bit off. I think the head that she comes packaged with, that you can see right here, I think it does a good job of resembling Taya, but it does feel like it might be a little bit off as far as her likeness goes. So that's the only reason it isn't a perfect 10, because everything else about this figure is fantastic. I mean, the increase in articulation that no other figure out there does on the market, no other women's wrestling figure right now, has the articulation that this does, than the Lady Maravilla. The detail in the sculpting from head to toe to make it unique to Taya and her physique is freaking awesome. And what I absolutely love about that is I've been a fan of Taya from when I first saw her on Impact. I think it was like 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. She was awesome. And I've followed her career through the years. And I never expected her to have such a detailed, such an amazingly unique wrestling figure, and I'm so glad that she has that, because she deserves it. Now, the one thing I will say, my biggest gripe is that we need to see more women's wrestling figures made by Boss Fight Studios. It's been over 2 years since we got the last premium collector lady released in the line, and quite frankly, with how great and amazing this figure is, I want to see at least a few women released in the line every single year. Now, I don't make wrestling figures. I know it's got to be quite the process, and it takes time, but man, I would love to see them increase productivity, whether by switching factories, whatever it may be, because these women's wrestling figures have the ability to seriously be the best out there, but there needs to be an uptick in production, in my opinion, to qualify. So this Taya Valkyrie is going to be a hard figure to beat in 2025 for Figure of the Year, honestly, because it is tremendous. Now, right now on BossFightShop.com, Big Bad Toy Store, Entertainment Earth, she's listed at $39.99, and I 1000% think she is well worth the price, especially at a time where there are smaller companies making retro figures with way less detail, way less parts, way less articulation, way less creativity being sold for that same price or higher, which is crazy to me. But this figure has so much good about it, it is well worth the price. Thanks for stopping by LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here. To get a first look at all future women's wrestling figure reviews, make sure to hit subscribe and become an official resident of LJV today. Now, there are a lot of women's wrestling figure reviews coming out very soon. My next review should be Elite Series 115 Kairi Sane, which looks like another amazing figure. So look for that review next week. There's been some postal delays. I'm sure a lot of y'all out there are experiencing them. So bear with me, stay tuned, and that review will be up very shortly. But I hope you enjoyed today's figure review of Taya Valkyrie. I appreciate y'all watching, and have a great night, y'all.
My baby.